Good evening, Charlotte community. I want to welcome everybody to the Elizabeth Community Meeting. This is something new for us. These are uncharted times, and this is the first time that we have held a community meeting virtually like this. So I want to welcome everybody. My name is Phil Rieger. I am the Director of the Department of General Services, and I am the person that's accountable for the Gold Line project. And so today we're going to have various speakers that speak to the Gold Line project. But before we get started, I wanted to introduce our District 1 Council member, Larkin Eggleston, and ask him to get us kicked off.
Good evening. Thank you, Phil. I'm Larkin Eggleston. I am the council member for District 1, representing Elizabeth, Plaza Midwood, and all points in, around, and in between. And certainly appreciate everybody who was able to log on tonight and join this conversation. This project has been, I know, very painful for a lot of people in the Elizabeth community, as it has been on my side of Independence Boulevard. I live over in Plaza Midwood. And so, you know, I hope that tonight's conversation, there is plenty to be frustrated about with the delays that this project has experienced, and plenty of places where we'll look back on this and figure out how to improve the next time around with a project of this nature. But I hope that what we can focus on tonight is where we stand now. I'm sure many of you have seen, either in person or in the news in the last 48 hours, that concrete pouring is going on with the Hawthorne Bridge right now. It's certainly an encouraging sign and long overdue. But I hope we can focus on making sure everybody understands where we're at, what the new timeline is, and hearing from staff how we're going to assure that Elizabeth is put back together in a way that you guys can be proud of, be happy about. And you know, I do think that when the streetcar is up and running, it's going to be something that's going to be a great amenity for the community. Hopefully we will be back in somewhat normal times and feel more confident riding public transit again by that point. But I hope that folks will be glad when this, I know you'll be glad when it's over, but I hope that you'll think it was worth it. We know we could have done this better, more efficiently. When I got elected in the fall of 2017, this was already ongoing, and something that I expected would wrap up in my first term. As it stands now, it will be well into my second term when it does. And so I think John Lewis can probably attest to the fact I'm usually a pretty good-natured and jovial person around the government center. This project is maybe the single project that has caused me to not be that person on a couple of occasions. And I don't even have to deal with the noise and the disruption nearly as acutely as many of you do who live near this site. So apologies in advance. We understand the missteps and the improvements that we will make next time. But again, hope that tonight can be about where do we go from here, and the good news that there is finally light at the end of this tunnel or bridge. So certainly appreciate y'all pulling this together, Phil and team. Thanks to Evan and all the leadership from the ECA for their consistent and constant engagement with this and helping us work through it. And look forward to making sure that everybody is on the same page tonight and moving forward, and then having a party on the bridge here in just a couple of months. Which, Phil, I assume y'all are going to be throwing us a party on the bridge, right?
We'll have a party on the bridge and we'll dance with you.
All right.
Thank you, council member. I also want to introduce a longtime Charlotte resident and a person that's been advocating on behalf of the Elizabeth community for quite some time. I want to introduce Evan Kettler. Evan's the vice president of the Elizabeth Community Association. Evan, it's yours. The microphone's yours.
Thank you, Phil. Hopefully I'm not muted. I know my video is now on. I wanted to, gosh, Larkin, you said a lot in your brief chat there. I'll admit to that. I want to welcome the residents of our community, the businesses, the people that live there, their pets and everything else. I don't live on Hawthorne Lane, so I have not had to live through this multi-year project. I appreciate the efforts that the city has made on our behalf. I started as a project manager many years ago, and I learned that the ability to accurately and manage and estimate a project was directly related to how many times you had done it before. And I'm afraid in a city this size, with an infrastructure project this big, we've never done this before. And so I appreciate that. Like Larkin, my focus, and anyone who knows me will know, I'm a strategy person. I'm interested in what we get at the end, what it looks like, what it feels like, and what it lives like. And so I have to say thank you to a few people who are responsible for this meeting actually being here. First, I'll start with our committee members. Morgan Williams, resident of Hawthorne Lane on the 7th Street side of the bridge. If you know Morgan, you'll know he's a persistent and accurate person. And so he has really not let anyone slide on this. And I say thank you to him because he has represented the community well. I want to thank Ann Lambert, who is another ECA, Elizabeth Community Association board member on the central side of the bridge. And Sarah Crowder, who's the president of the ECA, and she has given us her best as well. Along the line, lots of other people have been involved, but thank you all. And we're all shooting for the best here. Beyond that, a couple of ground rules. As Phil said, there may be children in the room. Everyone will see every question, so please be mindful of that. Every question will ultimately be answered. Is that correct, Phil?
That's correct.
Every question will ultimately be answered, even if not in the hour that we have allotted to this, but later. So please keep your eyes open. We will try to send a link. It may be early next week before everything is posted online. Beyond that, when you see questions, you'll be allowed to upvote those questions. So if you want to add emphasis and hope for a real answer online, that's a great idea. Other than that, I think it's time for me to just get out of the way. I will have any questions that I have reserved for later to kick off the Q&A session. Let's get to our panelists.
Thank you, Evan. So let me introduce who we have with us today. First, let me recognize Assistant City Manager Angela Charles. Angela is a part of City Manager Marcus Jones's executive team, and Angela has been a great support for this project. And just want to thank Angela for being on the webinar with us today. To my left is Jennifer Smith. Jennifer is the city engineer for the city of Charlotte. Betty Coulter, the division manager for the risk management division of the city of Charlotte, as well as Mecklenburg County and CMS, is joining us tonight, and she will be on our panel. And then finally, John Lewis, CEO of the Charlotte Area Transit System, is on the webinar with us tonight. And a special thanks to Ashley Price, who's sitting to my right. Ashley is our chief administrator tonight. She's making the technology work, and so we really appreciate her efforts. She will be posing some of the written questions that are written tonight. And just to reemphasize, before we get started, a few housekeeping items. The webinar will allow all of the folks that are attending tonight to see the panelists, but you will not be able to see who's attending. However, you can post questions using the Q&A function on your screen, and so we would encourage you to do that. And again, just want to reemphasize that please write your questions in a manner that little eyes can view those. We could have children, probably do have children viewing tonight, and we want to be respectful of that. And then finally, we won't likely be able to answer every question live tonight, and so we will answer every question, and so we're going to be doing that by posting the answers in the form of a frequently asked questions document on the website as well as the recording for tonight's meeting, so that everybody that did not get an opportunity to tune into the webinar tonight will be able to watch it. And so that if folks aren't able to get all their questions answered tonight, they'll be answered as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Smith, our first panelist, and Jennifer's going to give us a project construction update.
Okay. Are the slides up? Can I see? I'm sorry. I'm not quite on this share screen. Next slide. Next slide. So good evening. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I'm here to give you the construction update. So next slide. So for the month of May, as Councilmember Eggleston has shared, you have seen the concrete being poured for the bridge deck. 2 of the 3 deck pours have been completed, and our third and final deck pour is scheduled for Thursday early morning. However, that is weather dependent. As you see, we are getting quite a bit of rain right now. And the alternate dates for that will be Friday, Saturday, or the Tuesday after Memorial Day. And we will let you know for certain come tomorrow if it's going to be delayed from Thursday early morning. The other work that's being completed along Hawthorne Lane and the rest of the project area, we are working. Our work has started at Sunnyside on Hawthorne, where we're getting ready to, we're prepping that roadway to prepare the end of the line, or what we call special track, to be installed. That's where the trains will turn around, or not really turn around, but go in and come back out on the next line to be either go to or from the uptown area. The contractor is also drilling holes that will be foundations to be poured, that will then install poles that will hold and carry the overhead wires that run the streetcars. And then we're also beginning work on punch list items and roadway surfaces. And when I mean punch list items, we're looking at the roadway, curb, gutter, track, sidewalk, any fencing that does not meet spec or did not meet the plans, or may have been damaged since the contractor originally worked on that, and we're repairing those. I know at one point in time, Morgan had pointed out on a call, there's some steel plates in Hawthorne, I think around 8th Street, and we had gone in and we had done some repairs to the sanitary sewer system, and we'll be making sure those repairs are good and set. Those plates will be coming out, and that'll probably be happening over the next several weeks. But we'll be making those repairs throughout May and into June. Next slide. So for June through August, on the bridge itself, we still have more concrete to pour. We will be pouring the side walls of the bridge, or what we call parapet walls. We will be pouring the concrete sidewalk and medians. That concrete needs to set some, so you might see some inactivity on the bridge for some time period while that concrete cures. And then we'll be installing the track. And again, that track is embedded in concrete, so more concrete is going to be going on the bridge. And then finally, the pavement markings, all to have a bridge open the end of July, beginning of August. Along Hawthorne Lane, in the months between June and August, we'll be completing the track work at Sunnyside and on Hawthorne that kind of comes up to the bridge. There's a section there in front of Bay Street that the track isn't laid yet before you even get to the bridge. So we'll be completing that work. We'll be putting in the poles on the foundations and starting to string that overhead wire. And again, we'll continue with punch list items. There's a section of track that we do need to make some repairs on between 5th and Park. So we'll be removing some track and some of that concrete work and having to reinstall some track in that section of Park Drive and 5th Street. So you'll see all that over that June to August timeframe. Next slide. Come September to late 2020, early 2021, that's when you're gonna be seeing everything kind of come together and finishing. All the overhead wire that will move the streetcar will be finished. We'll be working on the platform shelters, and the stop amenities will be installed, completing the roadway work. Ultimately, the surface of the roadway and the concrete will be even. We'll be conducting that in-street vehicle testing, so you'll see streetcars running up and down with no passengers in them, and not available to carry anyone, but ultimately that streetcar service would begin late 2020, early 2021. Next slide. Just a couple other things. The construction hours are typically 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the contractor. However, during those late evening or early morning concrete pours, we will provide a minimum 48-hour advance notice before that work will start, so you're aware of that. A lot of those concrete pours are happening, and even some of the steel work that we're doing is very temperature sensitive, and so that's the reason for the early morning hours. We are continuing to send out project updates and street and lane closures by email. If you are not receiving those emails, it's not too late to sign up. It's really good information and important information to receive. So you can sign up by texting Goldline to 73224 or visit publicinput.com/Goldline. Those street closures are also shown on the websites, charlottenc.gov/street closures, and that includes all of the street closures that run through the Department of Transportation. And if you're just looking for Goldline specific closures, you can get on the ridetransit.org/GL closures for those specific closures. Also, while we're continuing our work, there may be limited access to driveways. City staff will communicate that directly with those affected property owners. And then lastly, Tim Morton, if you've been on the project a while, you probably know Tim Morton's name. You've probably seen Tim Morton, probably talked to Tim Morton. He is our chief inspector on this project. If you have any construction related questions, certainly reach out to him. His email address and phone number are there. We do have other inspectors on the project, and one of the comments that we had received is they aren't noticeable and not visible enough. And so those inspectors are now wearing safety vests that have the Charlotte crown on the back of them. And we also have assigned 2 City of Charlotte vehicles to inspectors that are in that area. So certainly if you have a question and you see an inspector with the City of Charlotte logo on the back, you can go talk to them, or if you see a vehicle, you'll know they're around and you can talk to them and ask any questions you have of them as well. That's all I had.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so one of the topics that we know have been of a particular interest to community members is, what do we do if we have perceived or believed that there was damage done to our property as a result of the project? And so we have asked Betty Coulter, our risk management division manager, to address those specifically. And so I'm going to turn it over to Betty to pretty quickly run through the process for filing a claim with the city. The microphone's yours, Betty.
Thank you. Good evening. As Phil mentioned, we handle the claims for the City of Charlotte. And as you can see, if you go to the next slide, please, this is our claims process. If you have a claim that you would like for the city to receive and evaluate, this is the claims process. You submit the claim. We preferably would like it in a written form. and we have a claim form that's available on our website. Any additional documentation that you have to go along with your claim, once you complete the paperwork, please submit any additional paperwork that you have, reference any pictures, any damage that you may have had. If you have before pictures versus after pictures, that would be very helpful in the investigation. Once we receive your claim, we will send you a letter, and it will tell you that it takes us about 6 weeks to look at a claim and evaluate it, depending on the type of the claim. Then once the claim has been evaluated, there will be a determination. And in that determination, one of the things that's stated in the letter is if we're liable for the claim or not. And then what we would do if we're not liable, we would assist you with making a claim with our third party, which is the contractor's insurance company. We have worked with the third party insurance company on other occasions. We also have a field adjuster that we send out in our investigation of the claim. And he is from Preferred Solutions. And he's been out to the site and he's looked at the site. And I think he's met with a couple of people there. Next slide, please. And then once we do all that in our investigation piece, you receive your letter, then we review each claim on a case-by-case basis. In this situation, we will have one claim person that you would need to speak to. Her name is Tammy Robleski. She is the claims manager, claims and litigation manager. Her direct number is shown on the PowerPoint there. If you are unable to speak to her when you call, she will return the call back to you. So again, just to go over, once you file the claim, you will be contacted by Tammy Robleski or either someone from Preferred Solutions. Once that is done, and if we need to come out to the site, we'll make a visit to the site. If you have any pictures, please make sure you share those with us, either by email or mail. Our offices currently are not open, but we are working remotely. We will try to return your call within 24 hours. We will look at your claim and should have an answer back to you within 6 weeks, whether or not what the disposition of the claim is. If it is a claim, again, that we are not handling internally and we do need to deny that claim, then we will assist with you making a claim with the third party adjuster. I'm sorry, not the third party adjuster, but with the contractor insurance company. That's typically our process that we manage within our unit. If there are any questions or you have any comments, just let us know. I'll be happy to give you a call back. I think there's an avenue for you all to send us questions. I'll be happy to assist you with those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. And our final speaker tonight is John Lewis, CEO of the Charlotte Area Transit System. And John's going to speak to what operations will look like after construction is done and testing is over and the streetcars are running. John, you've got the floor. John, you're muted. John, you're muted.
Remember, I am talking. I am on the conference call. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you now, John. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. I hope the technical difficulties have been alleviated. As I'm appreciative of the opportunity to go through the CAT's operational parameters. Once the construction phase is open and we're moving into revenue service. And so beginning with our operating hours, our daily operating hours and the frequency of our service. So the streetcar will operate, next slide, please. The Gold Line streetcar will operate on generally the same operating hours as the Blue Line does. So with revenue service starting in early 2021, rail operations will be 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 2 a.m. Those are the latest parameters. And again, similar to the operating parameters of the Lynx Blue Line. And the reason for that, we want to make sure that people who may need to take more than one train to reach their origin or destination will not be stuck because one line may end service earlier than another. So all of our rail corridors will operate on the same opening and closing schedules. Now, the frequency, again, this is where we stood prior to the COVID health crisis. This was the agreement that we had with the federal government when we accepted the federal grants, the 50% of the cost of the project. We outlined the operating parameters of the project. Now that we're going through this health pandemic and ridership has changed significantly, it is possible that these will change, but they will not become more frequent. So this is sort of the most frequent model for train service is the one that I go through, and I will just ask that community members stay tuned as we get closer to operating and we get a better understanding of what public transit will look like in this new normal. These operating hours could change, and we will certainly get back to you with that, but under no circumstances will they become more frequent or longer service hours. So weekdays during peak hour, and I'll define peak generally as our normal pre-pandemic peak of commuting hours, generally from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Trains will be operating every 15 minutes. Off-peak would be 9 to generally 3 p.m., 15 to 20 minutes, and then back on peak during the evening commute, 4 to 7, and then back to off-peak 15 to 20 minutes during the off-peak hours until 2 a.m. And then Saturday weekend schedules during the entire day, recognizing there are generally peak and off-peak periods on the weekends. There will be 15-minute trains during the daytime, 20-minute intervals in the evening, and then on Sunday, 20-minute intervals during the daytime and 30-minute during the evenings. Again, I want to make sure that everyone understands this was our understanding and our contractual obligation with the Federal Transit Administration. Our world and operating environment has changed significantly since then. These could be subject to change as our bus service and our train services has changed schedules currently day to day. So this is, again, the most frequent service model that we'll see on the opening day. It could be less frequent as we get closer, but we will certainly inform the community of any changes to our operating parameters well ahead of opening day. Next slide, please. So our fares for the Gold Line will be $2.20, the same as the fares are for the Blue Line and for our bus service. Those of you who may be familiar with our Phase 1 service, which was fare free, now that we are adding and connecting to Phase 2, we will be charging a fare for this service, and it'll be the same fare as all the rest of our transit offerings. There are many different areas where fare payment can be made. Tickets can be purchased either online at our past sales locations at the transit center or grocery stores and other third-party outlets, or customers can utilize our cell phone mobile payment app, the CATS Pass mobile payment app, and pay their fare utilizing their cell phones. Next slide. Lastly, the vehicle technology. We are moving to a modern streetcar, and the picture on the slide shows the vehicle that will actually be in service. These are the same Siemens S80 vehicles that we use on the Blue Line for our light rail. The only difference is because this is operating in mixed traffic, it is a little shorter than our light rail, our Blue Line vehicles. Also, this vehicle is a hybrid vehicle, and so it has the ability to disconnect from the catenary as it goes through Uptown and operate on battery. So we will be moving on day one to the modern streetcar, which is significantly less quieter than the old style trolleys that were in operations for phase one. So with that, that concludes my presentation on the operational side of the equation. I guess if there are any questions of me or any of the other panelists, I'll turn back over to Phil and he can moderate those. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just want one clarification. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, the new modern streetcars will be more quiet, not less quiet.
Did I say less quiet? I'm sorry. They were more quiet, less noisy than the old style trolleys, the green trolleys that we had in service before.
Great. I didn't
Thank you, Phil.
with the wrong impression. You're welcome. So that concludes the presentation part of today's meeting, and we're going to transition now to our question and answer portion of today's meeting. It looks like we got about 32 questions, which is really good. We will probably not be able to get through 32 questions in the next 25 minutes, but we will do the best to get through as many as we can. Again, just remember that if we don't get those questions answered, that we will be posting answers to all questions in a FAQ document that will be posted sometime next week, along with the recording of this video. So to kick us off, I'd like to turn the floor back over to Evan. And I think, Evan, you have our first question.
I do. First, I just want to say thank you because, as we all know, this is just an experiment. We've never done this kind of a community meeting before. Under the circumstances, well done. Thank you. I'm going to make this quick because I want to leave room for as many questions to be answered as possible. So I'm going to short form my question. First, is there anything that we don't see now that you want to share with us about what it will be like once this opens? Streetscape, landscape, public art. How will you keep track of the noise and vibration levels once it goes? And are there any safety issues that we should be aware of or plans to implement safety along the route?
So that's a good question. There's a lot embedded in that question. Why don't I turn that over to Jennifer to talk about what the end product of the project looks like. And I think we have some large renderings to share with the community that might help folks sort of envision what it will ultimately look like.
So while Ashley's pulling those up, I can share, I heard what will the landscaping look like? We are working on that landscaping plan now with our landscape management division. And because of the overhead catenary lines, the trees that will be planted back will be small or medium maturing trees. We don't want them to get in the tangle of the wires. We are also evaluating existing trees along the line to make sure that we don't need to trim or do any work along that. But once we have that landscape plan completed and prepared, we can certainly share that with the community. The picture that we have up right now is a rendering of the look of the bridge. One of the big things on the bridge was that we put the bridge back like it was before. So it has the same curve, it has the same general look besides the catenary lines and the streetcar tracks that go across the bridge. But the bridge is to generally look very similar to what it was before. As you can see, this cross section, there's bike lanes on both directions, and then the inline streetcar lane with the traffic lane, and then the median in the middle. So sidewalks on both sides of the street throughout, I think, the majority of the length of Hawthorne, with bike lanes and the travel path. And the middle lane in some instances will be either a turn lane or median or stop. So that is generally the look for the bridge. There was another slide of the look. This is at Park Drive looking towards 7th Street and towards the bridge. And so you can see there in the middle, there's the left turn lane or for either direction, the bike lanes on either side, and the sidewalks on the side. And like I said, the landscaping plan is being worked on right now. So I think I covered landscaping, kind of streetscape look.
You just need the final picture. So just a reminder, and John spoke to this, that the streetcar will be a modern streetcar. It won't be the trolleys. And in the pictures here are pictures of the actual vehicles that will run up and down the line. These are already, if I remember right, being tested on the current Blue Line alignment. So they're already testing these vehicles. And after September, you will start to see these vehicles likely running up and down the Gold Line alignment. They won't have passengers in them to start with, but just a reminder that these are modern streetcars.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm gonna be short if I can, because there are a lot of questions stacking up. So now let's look into the future a little bit. I mean, I can walk down Hawthorne Lane and see that there are already things that are probably not up to your current standards, but were consistent with the standards when this project was put out to bid. Accessibility, bike lanes, sidewalks, things like that. I'm asking you all to look into the future and tell us, and I'm gonna actually read this because we took the time to think about this. We recognize that the original project had its scope and it's going to be done. What we're looking for is what additional work will be done by the city and its staff to help us with incremental improvements to pedestrian, bicycle, and e-vehicle traffic, the possible impact on parking for local residents who live near where people who want to ride on the streetcar might want to park on their streets. Zoning and density issues, have they been thought about? Incremental improvements to the streetscape, and an ongoing means of engaging with our community so that it's not, here's the streetcar, gotta go.
So I'm going to take that question, Evan, and then I would ask any of the panelists that feel led to chime in. As it relates to additional capital improvements that maybe weren't included in the scope of the streetcar, the city develops a capital plan every year as a part of its budget process. And that capital plan is something that is developed as a result of community feedback that staff receive over the years, as well as a lot of technical analysis. And then all of those potential projects are put on a big list and generally ranked. And so Elizabeth community projects compete for the same dollars that other communities throughout Charlotte that need improvements compete for. And so the process for getting projects put into that capital project bucket is to come to community meetings, to provide staff feedback. And so you can provide that to me, you can provide that to Jennifer, you can provide that to our Department of Transportation, you can provide that to your city council member. A lot of forums to provide feedback, and then those projects then go through a vetting process and ultimately through a budget process to compete for scarce resources that the city invests in the community. From a parking perspective, it's my understanding that particularly along Hawthorne Lane, we might have lost 5 or 6.
On one side of the bridge, maybe 8 or 10 on.
So maybe 15 to 16 parking spaces that we won't see again because of the streetcar and because of the bike lanes. And those parking spaces along Hawthorne, because Hawthorne, for those of you that have lived in that community for a long time, has been a lot of different things, including a 4-lane undivided road to a 3-lane median divided, and now it is 3 lanes median divided streetcar with bike lanes. And so in that interim period, we had some space that people weren't using appropriately, and one way to stop that was to put in some temporary parking spaces. That space has been used through the project, and so we won't see those parking spaces return. And then finally, from a zoning perspective, and I think, Evan, maybe the thinking here is, what does future development look like? And I just can't answer that question right now. That is a planning department question. And so if you would allow me, I'm going to take that back to our planning director, Taiwo, and his folks, and get a more complete answer to that question. But we also have to remember that the Elizabeth neighborhood is a historic district. And so any redevelopment that occurs has to happen with the lens that it's a historic district. So I hope that's helpful, and we can catch up offline if I need to address anything else, and we can make sure we get that in the Q&A.
And I'll let that go and let our community follow up with any questions off that. I have follow-ups, but let's give them a chance.
Great. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, and she's going to begin to ask some of the, again, we're going to take them first by which questions got the most thumbs up or votes, and then we'll take them in the order that we get them, and we'll get through as many as we can. So Ashley, you have the floor.
Great. Well, this first question received a good many votes. When will the Hawthorne Bridge be open for vehicle and pedestrian traffic?
I'll let Jennifer answer that.
So right now, we are looking at the end of July, beginning of August. Everything that is coming in from the contractor on the schedule is showing that. And certainly we will continue to keep the community updated if that schedule changes. But right now, everything is looking good, that it's the end of July, beginning of August for the bridge to be open.
Great. In the future, could contracts for large projects such as this have a clause requiring the general contractor to use means and methods with the least adverse impact on residents and communities? This is not the case with the Gold Line contract, to the detriment of our residents and businesses.
So that is a question about means and methods, and what means and methods means for those that aren't necessarily familiar with construction contracting is the contractors bid on a scope of work, and contractors are allowed, not allowed, they are the people that determine the means and methods in which the project gets built under a few parameters. So let me turn it over to Jennifer to speak to that question directly.
Yeah, and there are certain things that we can put in our contract on setting timeframes of when they can work, how long they have to complete something, and we can put liquidated damages in to charge them for that type of stuff. But realizing anything that we add into the contract that may restrict or cost more money for the contractor, we will see those prices. And so it is a balance of trying to figure out what requirements to put in those contracts that they're bidding on and making sure that they're fully aware of what they're bidding on and what is in that contract so that they can put the right price for them to do that work. So, I mean, it's something we can certainly look at. I think we always evaluate whether or not to have intermediate completion times, whether we have requirements on time of day and when they can work or not work. And even in the instance with this contract, there were some of because the Hawthorne Bridge is over Independence, North Carolina Department of Transportation also has a big say in when they can work and when they can't work, and they do require a lot of night work. So there's different things that can be looked at and evaluated, and it is always a balance on what is the best thing for the community.
What factors caused the original precision measurements or manufacturing process defect for the steel trusses to fail? And related to that, what is the cost to taxpayers for the deconstruction and reconstruction for replacing the trusses?
So that's a construction question, and we'll let our city engineer answer that.
Yeah, can you repeat the very beginning of that question?
What factors caused the original precision measurements or manufacturing process defect for the steel trusses to fail?
So we require that the contract to submit to us what we call shop drawings of what they are going to have manufactured. And with those shop drawings, I think they had some inaccurate elevations on those drawings that then got sent to the manufacturer to manufacture. I don't know all the details of exactly what happened and why it didn't get built, why the right elevations weren't chosen, but that will all be resolved most likely through a claim from the contractor. Right now, we have not paid any extra for that mistake. The city's position is that it is the contractor's responsibility to get the bridge correct, and we are not paying them any extra for that. So I think that got the question, but
will you be milling and overlaying the roads and replacing curb in areas that have been most utilized by heavy construction vehicles? For example, Louise 8th and 9th.
So those areas will be evaluated. I can't say for certain that it will happen or won't happen. I think it will depend on the condition and whether or not that the contractor damaged that or not, but that would be evaluated as part of what we call this punch list items and walking the site and evaluating the site to determine what work the contractor needs to do to kind of complete the project and close out the project.
Recently, the bridge was announced to be opened at the end of April. What caused the delay to June to August? And additionally, how can we be confident that this is a believable timeframe?
I'm trying to remember what the reason was. I do not remember what the reason was from April to June. I apologize. But we'll be able to get that information. I don't know, John, do you remember? I hate to put you on the spot, but.
No, I could suppose that, but I think that's a question we probably ought to research and get the exact information.
So we will make sure that answer is in our Q&A.
Knowing that when this phase of the project has been completed, Sunnyside will be the closest boarding station for the train from the nightlife area, will there be a permanent increase in police patrol within our neighborhoods?
So Phil, why don't I take a shot at that? I think there are two portions to that. Number one, I'm guessing that what the questioner is asking is, as we draw people from the Plaza Midwood area and the restaurants and nightlife there, will there be a community impact? And I think that's something we'll have to evaluate, but CATS does have its own security force. That is contracted police force. The G4S, if you're ever on any of our other lines or at the transit center, you will see our uniformed security officers. They are responsible for the security of CATS operations. That would include the Gold Line and all the stations and areas surrounding that. And so they will add that line to their normal patrol. And so you will see G4S officers patrolling through that area and stopping at each of the stations. And I'm sure they are very clear on the ebb and flow of when people come and go from social gatherings, and that stop will be a focal point. If it gets to an area where we will need additional service beyond what our company police can offer, we also have will bring in CMPD as needed. But right now it falls within their purview and responsibility of our company security force.
Thank you, John.
Is it possible to open the sidewalks of the bridge before the rest of the bridge is open? These delays have been a pain to the community, and if I could at least walk across the bridge sooner than August, I would consider it a small win.
Jennifer?
So I think we could certainly evaluate that. I think the issue will be is that if the contractor's out there working, it's still an active construction zone for that contractor, and that would be a liability for them, and to have people in the construction zone. And so until it's turned over to us as being complete and not active, I would hesitate to allow pedestrians in an active construction zone.
Safety is obviously a paramount concern.
Yeah, but we can certainly evaluate that.
This is Evan. Can I jump in for 1 second? I completely get that question. We're trying to close the gash through our community. And that bridge being closed is a gash in our community. So anything that can be done puts our community back together again. Thank you.
And we hope to do that quickly. We just wouldn't compromise our community safety over that. So again, don't want to minimize the impact that this project has had on the community. But we can see, and we hope you can see, the light at the end of the tunnel. And we're just going to ask to be patient. We're going to open that thing up as soon as we possibly think it's safe to do it, and we can.
Actually, the next question is along those lines. What, if anything, is being done during the shelter-in-place order to accelerate the timeline as presented, given that there is reduced traffic?
So I know the contractor throughout the line is trying to do a lot of the roadway work while there's minimum traffic. They have really been working a lot in the uptown area, working on some of the intersection tie-ins and the grades there. As far as along the Hawthorne line, the main push has really been getting the contractor to get the bridge completed. So I'm not certain that there's been much extra, or I do think that some of that CDOT has relaxed some of the lane closure requirements and timing on when lanes can be open or closed. And that has allowed crews to get in a little bit earlier and stay a little bit later than normal. But I will say I think the contractor is focused more in the uptown area and some of those streets along the uptown, and taken advantage of the the issues with the pandemic.
During several sessions of bridge and road work, our home shook, swayed, and vibrated as if we were having an earthquake. Will an independent structural engineer, free of charge, come to our property to inspect for structural or foundation damage?
So Betty, did you hear there's a question about an independent structural engineer paid for by the city to evaluate properties? Can you address that?
Certainly. If there are specific homes that believe that they've had damage, the first step would be to submit information to file a claim and let us evaluate that. In that evaluation, if there is an opportunity, or if it is recommended that we have a structural engineer to evaluate that, we will also do that on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Betty.
Will the drainage problems at the 7th Street intersection be corrected?
I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure what drainage problems, but certainly can check into that and evaluate that.
This one's for Jennifer. There has been a lot of rework, bridge, stormwater, etc. I am sure that the community would like to understand why there has been so much rework. I am not aware of the 5th Street section rework. Could you help explain that scope for the rework along that 5th Street section and how that will impact traffic and for how long those traffic impacts might be?
So I think the rework is caused by the contractor not following the plans and meeting our specs. And so our inspectors are watching that work and evaluating when work doesn't meet our specs, and the contractor is being required to do that work over if it doesn't meet our specs or the plans. In the instance of the rework that needs to be done between 5th Street and Park Drive, there is welds in the track that hold different pieces of welds together, and the welds are not the correct welds. And so a portion of track will need to be removed. And of course, that track is embedded in concrete, so the concrete has to be removed, and a new section of track with new welds will have to be installed. We are waiting for the plan from the contractor on the timing of that, when that will happen. It is on the, I guess it's St. John's Baptist Church side of Hawthorne Lane between Park Drive and 5th Street. So it would probably most likely just be a lane closure, not the entire length closed. But again, we do not have the plan yet from the contractor on how they are planning on repairing that.
So thank you. We are just leading up to the end of our time. Our time expires around 7:30, and so we're going to take just one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. And again, we'll answer the rest of those questions in a Q&A document. So one more question.
So the next question we have is related to the girder issue. The girder issue seems to be an example of negligence at the very least that cost our neighborhood a year of tremendous stress on business owners and neighbors. We've had to endure months of cut through traffic. What recourse did the city have against those responsible for this huge problem? Please explain what happened and how the city has been compensated.
So the city has not been compensated. The contract has a completion date, and the city is evaluating that completion date and when that time would stop, and liquidated damages will be charged to the contractor for the days that they go over that end date. And so we are in the midst of evaluating what that end date is. There has been work that has been added to the contract that would extend the contract dates, not necessarily in the Hawthorne area, but throughout the project length. And so that is something that the city is currently evaluating, what that end date would be, and what the amount of liquidated damages charged to the contractor could be. I'm certain that the contractor will disagree with our assessment of that, and we will be involved in claims and evaluating those claims after the job's done, probably for many months.
So that being our final question, I want to thank the community for participating. I think at a point in time, I saw as many as 98 people on the webinar, and that's just phenomenal. I want to thank the panelists for their time this evening. I want to thank Councilmember Eggleston and Mr. Kettler for being with us tonight, and Ms. Charles. I hope this was valuable. And so feel free to throw a little feedback in that Q&A if this was a valuable experience. This is the first time we've tried this. This is a bit of an experiment. So thank you for going on that journey with us. Again, we're not going anywhere. This isn't a one and done thing. If you have questions about what's going on the project, we listed Tim Morton's phone number in the PowerPoint presentation. It is also on the website. And so if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. We'll be continuing to communicate with the community through weekly emails. So if you haven't signed up for those, it's not too late. And then finally, Ashley, if they have more questions, can you explain to them how to ask those questions?
Absolutely. So we will be posting the video of this webinar to http://ridetransit.org/GL closures. So that is going to go to the website there tomorrow. And in addition to the link to this video on that website, you will also be able to ask questions. It will look and feel very similar to the way you were able to ask questions today. You can provide your name or you can elect not to, and then you can ask the question. If you are able to ask that question between now and the end of the day Thursday, then we will include that question into the FAQ that we post later next week.
Ashley,
every question we asked today that we answered and was asked today will be posted in it as well.
Ashley, can you share that link in the question and answer box for folks? And if Evan or Sarah or somebody can capture that and then share that out on ECA's social media, email list,
We absolutely will do that. Thank you, Larkin.
That up for everyone to see here. So what everyone should see now is that link here on the screen. We'll also be posting these slides as well, and you'll be able to access all of that directly from the slide presentation.
So Evan, do you see that URL?
Yes, but I'm counting on Ashley to send it to me.
Okay, we will do that and we will get that out. So again, thank you for everybody's participation. And we're going to sign off and adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. And
Thank you.
Evan.